What's up, guys? I'm here to talk a little bit about NASCAR Heat 2 and what to expect when the game finally releases. So this is going to be sort of a prediction video like I did last year with NASCAR Heat Evolution. Now, there's still going to be some more information released, things like more gameplay, and there's other tracks we haven't seen yet. And there's still a couple of weeks left before the release of the game, so I'm sure that they're not finished releasing information. As far as career mode goes, there might be more stuff. I don't think they released all the information or everything there is to know about career mode. You know, maybe they did, but there's a small part of me that thinks there's still some more stuff. And I don't know if they're going to talk a little bit more about it. But there's a part of me that kind of wants them to keep some things secret. Just hold it back and let people discover this stuff when they play the game. I've talked about this before, and I always think it's a good idea for developers not to reveal everything, right? I remember way back in I don't know if it was the 2005 or 2006 E8 Thunder game, when they had rivalries and stuff. I remember the cutscenes, and there was a cutscene I think in the garage after the race, and sometimes you'd be pissed about your finish, and then all of a sudden some other driver that you had a rivalry with who was pissed off at you would just come charging out of nowhere, and you'd be in each other's face, and of course you'd never throw punches. So in a way it's kind of realistic, because you see these NASCAR races, these guys get in each other's face. They might shove each other a little bit, but they don't really fight. I don't think they want to fight. And the teammates come and split them up and stuff. But it's cool, you know. And the first time I saw that cutscene, I thought it was so awesome, because I didn't expect it. I didn't know that that was in the game, and it's just something that I found out organically playing the game. And it's moments like that that I remember the most. And that's part of presentation. I talk a lot about presentation, and that's something that all of these NASCAR games have lacked for at least 10 years. But I remember that. And the first time that happened, it made such an impact on me, because I didn't expect it. The developer didn't talk about that stuff as far as I can remember. The point is, I didn't really know it was in the game. And it's things like that that make these games memorable, that leave an impact. Not knowing about it, I think it's good. And I don't think it's a good idea for, 704 to tell us everything that's in the game or every addition they made. They should keep some of these things, just keep it to themselves, and just let this stuff come out when it comes out, and let people find out on their own. The problem is, I don't think they're going to do that, and I kind of understand why. NASCAR games have had a bad reputation, for a while now, and I don't think that they can afford to not talk about stuff they put in the game, because it's part of the marketing, and they kind of want to excite people. So I can understand why they may not want to keep certain things, secret. But it's just, for me, I think it would be good. But I do kind of understand if they don't want to do that, because they're trying to get as many people excited as possible and get the reputation, up to a positive place. But I'd like to see that. But now, as far as any future information, I think it's mostly going to be gameplay and showing us the other tracks. And maybe talk a little bit more about career mode. Maybe there's a little more, but I'm pretty impressed with what they did to show us and talk about. So I do think I have enough information to have a ballpark idea of what this game's going to be. And that's what I did last year, and that's what I'm doing now. One more thing about last year's game. And what I look for in all games, right? Obviously, I want the game to be entertaining. So that's the most important thing. Is the game fun to play? And then there's replay value, or how long can you keep playing this game and it remains interesting. And some games, even good games, you'd be surprised, don't have a lot of replay value, right? Some of the best games ever made don't really have a lot of replay value. For example, The Last of Us, one of the greatest games ever made. It's a masterpiece. I personally think it's a 10 out of 10. And by the way, 10 out of 10 does not mean a game is perfect. And a lot of people confuse that. When they see somebody give a game a perfect 10 score, that does not mean that the game is perfect. Every game has flaws. To me, 10 out of 10 just means that this thing is a masterpiece. It's a must-buy for anybody. And The Last of Us is a game like that. And those of you who played the game, I mean, I'd find it hard to believe anyone could play that game and not think that thing is absolutely amazing. But my point is that, in all honesty, that game does not have high replay value. And that's not a knock on the game, but it's a linear game. It's story driven, and once you finish the game, right, playing it the second time around, it's never the same. It's never the same because you already know what's going to happen for the most part. Now, I have the game, and I played it the first time. It blew me away, but I put it away. And then, almost a year later, after I hadn't played it in such a long time, I went through it again. And it was a fun experience. But in all honesty, I've had that game for years, and I've played it twice. And I mean, when I say play it, I mean play through the story. So that's not high replay value. But in a game like that, replay value is not as important as the initial experience. It's still a masterpiece. It's still an amazing game, and for me, a must-buy. For anybody, I would recommend it. But that's just an example of how sometimes even great games don't have replay value. Now, when it comes to sports games, the fact that it's a sports title inherently means it should have high replay value, because sports, you know, when a season's over, no matter what happens, if your team won a championship or your favorite player, you know, won the MVP, whatever the case is, whatever sport, there's always next year, and there's a year after that, and that's what a career is in a sports game. So sports games have replay value. So even if you won a championship, even if you played through a season, it does not diminish the replay value. And in sports titles, I naturally expect it to have a lot of replay value, right? And with NASCAR Heat Evolution, that's one of the biggest drawbacks. And it's the same. It was the same with all the Eutechnics games. And one of the biggest reasons for that, and this is what I always talk about, and I take it, I'm proud to say it's one of my personal causes. And yes, I'm talking about statistics. And I know some of you are tired of hearing about it, and I'm not going to go on a rant about it. I said everything I needed to say about it, so don't worry, I'm not going to keep going with it. What I just want to say is that that's the thing that's been missing since 2011 from all NASCAR games. And the reason I've been talking about it since then, and I've been making such a big deal about it, because without the stats, that kills replay value. Because why would you keep playing season after season and going through the grind when you're not building up any stats, there's no accomplishment? You don't feel like that sense of accomplishment that I always talk about. And a sense of accomplishment is one of the biggest things in games. All games, actually. You should feel like the things you do matter and it leads to something, right? There should be a payoff in the end. And NASCARs have been missing that payoff. And NASCAR Heat Evolution had very little replay value. And even just individual races, they finish, there's no celebration, no victory lane, no commentary. I talk a lot about pre-race and post-race commentary and getting presentation in the game, because It helps tie in everything that happens. And one of the reasons that the NBA 2K franchise is what it is because of career mode. It's because they do all of these things that I talk about, and they do them so well. And that's the star of those games. It's career mode. It's going through that grind and building up your career, you know. And then you can go from season to season, and it just feels cohesive. And every sports game pretty much does something like that, and some do it better than others. I remember one of the MLB show games a few years ago, and you work your way up from the minor leagues, and you gotta reach certain statistical milestones to move up, and you go from A ball to double A, triple A into the majors, and you can get sent down again if you don't perform. And the beauty of that game was, I remember when you retire, you can retire, right, whenever you choose, but if your stats were good enough, you got inducted into the Hall of Fame. That's what I want to see in a NASCAR game at some point, right? But that's another thing. Just giving you guys an idea of why stats and presentation are so important. So moving on from that, last year's game, I gave it, right, when it came out, my review I'm talking about, a 5.5 out of 10, which is a terrible score. And I think it was an accurate score. Doesn't mean that the game didn't do anything right. I actually credited 704 Games with doing several things they did well. I thought the AI was very stable, right? And I gave them credit for that. And the online multiplayer, I gave them a lot of credit for that. They got 40 players to work, and it was stable. You know, I honestly haven't seen too many people with stability issues. Yes, there were some, but that was a huge achievement. Any failures on the multiplayer, in my opinion, that's just the way online racing is. And I've told you guys before, there's a limit to what you can do with online racing. You can't control people, and people are the number one reason that online racing is the mess that it is. Now, I am excited about the things they've announced for this year, and one of the things I'm most excited about is one of the ideas I've been talking about since Eutechnics days. And in all honesty, I haven't heard too many people talk about it. I haven't heard anyone talk about it, but I'm assuming somewhere somebody must have mentioned it. But I talked about it, and I brought it up many times to Eutechnics, that they should try to figure out a way to add AI to online multiplayer, so you can fill the field with AI as well as real racers. And it helps create a buffer, and finally 704 is doing it. I'm not saying they got the idea from me, from one of my old videos, but all I'm saying is that I never saw too many people discuss that. And I've been one of the people constantly talking about stuff like that. And those of you who have seen my old videos and have been following me from the Eutechnics days, you know I've been talking about that stuff. So that's what excites me. That one of the things that I've always wanted to see, and not a lot of people were talking about, is going to be in this game on the online multiplayer. And I'm excited to see how that affects it. Now, I'm going to be honest. I do still think there's going to be huge problems online, and it's going to be people, as always, right? But in either case, I'm still excited. Now, NASCAR Heat Evolution, I gave it 5.5 out of 10. But guess what? It had very little replay value. I stopped playing the career mode in January, okay? Just a few months after the game came out. After I saw the limit to what career mode had to offer, and the fact that, there's no stats, I lost all interest. Now, what I did keep doing for a while was online racing, and even that, I got tired of that. And I actually stopped that sometime at the end of February. Some of you may have seen me online, right? Same tag, Disco Inferno 70. You might have raced with me once in a while, but you don't see me there anymore, and I've stopped that for months. It's just unplayable. So the only thing I've done with NASCAR Heat Evolution since then, maybe once a week, I'll run a race. Single player, offline. because I like to run 50% to 100%. I like long races. I think NASCAR is about a marathon. It's about running hundreds of miles. It's about making pit adjustments. It's about pit strategy and how, as the race goes on, thinking about what you're going to do to try to have a strategic advantage. That's what NASCAR is about. NASCAR is not about 5% races, just a handful of laps, and a bunch of guys just steamrolling into each other. That's not what NASCAR. That's why I don't like online multiplayer. So moving on from that, I stopped playing online multiplayer, and I stopped playing career mode a long time ago. So last year's game just didn't have replay value, or it had extremely little replay value. So right now, the game is only useful to me when I get that itch to play and run a NASCAR race, and I'll do it, and I'll just do a single race at a particular track, and I get it out my system, and then I stop playing. So maybe once a week on average. And that's why I bring up replay value and the importance of it. And the fact that a sports title like NASCAR hasn't had replay value. None of the Eutechnics games, and last year's game did not have it either. And it's because the lack of presentation and the lack of stats. That's the end of that. Now, everything that I've seen so far this year tells me that this game, it's going to have its flaws. And you have to have a realistic expectation. In other words, don't go into it with wishful thinking. Like, I want this game to be so great, so bad, that I'm just going to look at it, with tunnel vision. I try not to do that. And I pride myself in being honest and trying. And I remind myself, I'm like, you know what, don't get too excited and don't get too down at the same time, right? So I'm trying to take it all in, and I'm trying to be fair. And in all honesty, right, on a scale of 1 to 10, I truly believe that this game is going to be between a 7 out of 10 to a 7.5 out of 10, right? It might be a little lower, it might be a little higher. And those are the extras that we don't know about, right? That X factor, the things we don't know about the game till we see it. Like, did they fix the caution system? How is all of these features going to work? Is it going to be executed to where it works really well? And if it does, this game should be a blast. But if it doesn't work the way they're intending it to, it could also be a detraction, and it could make the game not that good. But I do believe, in my heart of hearts, looking at everything, I think it's going to be a solid, good game. Something that, if you're a fan of NASCAR, you're probably going to want to pick up. I'm not telling you that it's a day one pickup or not to wait. You should wait, maybe get a few takes from people, right? I'm not just saying wait for my review, right? If you want to do that, I'm honored. But I'm going to do a review. It's going to be 2 weeks after release. But there's going to be other people who are going to put reviews out much sooner. And, you may want to look at that stuff and decide, right? But I don't want to tell you that a guarantee, like, hey, this is going to be so great, you got to pick it up day one. I don't know that. This is all speculation. It's just an opinion. And I do this because I'm just curious to see if I can judge what this game is going to be. And then when it comes out, when I review it, how does it stack up, right? And it's just the thing that I find interesting. So I do think it's going to be 7 out of 10 to 7.5 out of 10. And that's a good score, right? That's a score that in my rating system, right, 1 out of 10, that's a good game. That's a game that you can buy and you'll enjoy. Now, the X factors, that's what's going to make or break where this game falls. And those are the things I don't really know. But I like all the ideas that they've put forward. The online looks interesting. The career mode really got me excited. I love this rivalry idea. And I just hope they execute it well. And yes, there's also red flags that I always tell you guys about. Red flags, things that pop up that make me kind of hesitant. And I tell you guys, that's a red flag. Well, of course, the no stats in career mode. And the fact that they haven't shown us presentation. The only thing that I consider part of presentation that they've actually shown is a quick shot of victory lane. And I'm being honest, it doesn't look that impressive. It looks like something that came right out of Technics and then made some small changes. Yes, it's better than nothing. I'd rather have that than nothing. But I'm hoping that when you finish races that there's something there. You know, it doesn't just like, okay, the race is over. Here's your speed rating. I don't get the speed rating thing and these points, SP points, whatever that is. You know, I'd rather have stats. Those points are meaningless. I don't know what they mean. I don't know what they do. I'm not going to say anything else about it, but I want to see more presentation, and they haven't talked about it. They haven't really shown anything. So that's an X factor, right? Hopefully we get surprised and we see stuff, and there's more to tie this game together, right? And flesh it out, which was the big problem last year. But having those red flags, that's what is going to keep this game from being all it can be. And a 7 to 7.5 out of 10 is a solid rating. And if it meets that, if it turns out to be 7 to 7.5 out of 10 for me, I can honestly say it's a good jump. And it's a really good leap forward, and it's a good step in the right direction. And, you know, that would be a good thing. I'd be satisfied with that. Okay? So, that's what I think. What do you guys think? Feel free to throw in your 1 to 10 scale. What do you think this game's going to turn out to be? And try to be objective, you know, and don't... I know some of you guys are like, screw these guys. Last year's game was horrible. This game's going to be horrible. Don't think that way. You know, just really look at everything and try to be objective. I'm trying to keep a positive outlook, but I'm trying to be realistic too. One more thing I want to say, right? I do think that this game, and don't go crazy, right? Just hear me out. I think this is going to be the best game we've seen in 10 years, right? That sounds like amazing, right? But and let's be honest, there's a low bar. So if you look at last year's game, it was bare bones. So obviously, I think everyone will agree that this game this year should easily surpass last year's game. I think everybody sees that, and nobody's going to be surprised about that. We all agree on that. Now, the previous 5 games that came from Technics, they were absolute garbage. They did 2 things that I did commend them for, and that I liked about it. One was the paint booth. All right. The only negative I could say about the paint booth, and it's not really a big negative, is that it wasn't that user friendly. Like, you did kind of have to fiddle with it a lot, and some of the things, you know, were a little difficult, and they could have made it a little more user friendly. But overall, it was a great paint booth. You could do some amazing paint schemes, and I spent a lot of time on that, you know, and you shouldn't be that way because the racing should have been the star, but in my opinion, the best part of that game was really the paint booth. And the other thing they did well, and something I want to see come back at some point, and I know some of you guys are going to be like, that's not realistic, and I'm not saying that it has to be in the game, but I would not mind seeing it come back, is the rewind feature. I think there are times, especially if you run long races like I do, something stupid can happen, and it's not necessarily your fault. It could be the AI does something wonky, or who knows. And the way Technics did it, they gave you 3 rewinds, you know, so it wasn't unlimited, and it only gave you a few seconds, right? So you can kind of have a little do-over if there was something that really screwed up your race. And I think that's a good thing, and it's optional. You don't have to use it, and it's, you know, I like options, you know. I don't like keeping people locked, you know. So the more options you give people, the better. So I would not mind seeing the rewind feature come back. But those are the two things that Eutechnics did well. Everything else, I didn't like it. So, going back to this game, it's going to be better than Heat Evolution, and it's going to be better, easily, than the 5 previous Eutechnics games. So now the question is, I said it's going to be the best game in 10 years. So that would include 2007, 2008, 2009 of EA. Now, I know some people are going to be like, 2009 was good, but keep in mind that most of the people that liked that 2009 game, it was really about online multiplayer. And you got to remember that way back in 2009, online racing was not like a widespread thing. It was still kind of new. And the fact that EA made it work well with 2009, that's the reason most people enjoyed that game. But the game overall was very flat. And the last couple of games by EA were flat. They weren't terrible. I'm not saying that they were as bad as Eutechnics, okay? Because they weren't. They were better. But they were like dull. They were flat. And EA fell victim to what any developer, if you keep developing a title year after year after year for like 10 years, at some point you just run out of ideas. And it became a cut and paste rehash. They just didn't know what else to do with it. And it showed. And it just was like, okay, the next game is going to be really 90% of the game is going to be the latest paint schemes and the latest roster updates. They didn't really bring anything else to the table. So it just felt like an update to the previous game. So those games were kind of flat. And I remember back then, a lot of people were screaming about, screw EA. We want another developer to take over. So I remember that. So even though we all like to talk a lot about the early Thunder series and games like Dirt to Daytona and how great they were, let's not forget that the last few years of the EA NASCAR games, they were really flat. So that's the other thing that I wanted to say. I do think this game's going to be better than those. And I think the online, they already had a good start. You can run a full field of real drivers. And now you're going to be able to have stage racing. You're going to have cautions. And you're going to have AI that you can fill the field with if you want. I think all that's just only going to elevate what they did well last year. I didn't blame the online multiplayer on the developer. The reason that the online racing is horrible, it's people. And I've talked about it before. And that's never going to change. So no matter how good the structure of this online is, you're still going to see a mess. Now I'm hoping that the AI, that the stage racing makes people want to race longer races and stop these quick sprints of just big, a crash derby that makes these online unplayable. So that's what I think of the game. And if you look at all those games going back 10 years, I do think I can say, I'm not going to say with absolute certainty, but I have a real good feeling that I'm going to be able to say this is the best game we've seen in 10 years. And it's a big deal on one hand, and also I'm saying, hey, you know what, the bar was kind of low. So you got a little bit of both, but the important thing is that this game is going to be a huge step in the right direction. I think it's going to be solid, okay? 7 out of 10 or 7.5 out of 10, somewhere around there. Now, what I'm hoping for is some surprises. Maybe the game turns out the things that I'm worried about, these red flags. And the other red flag I can't forget to mention, and it's probably the most important, is that this game looks a little too easy. And I'm hoping that when this game releases, that it's challenging. Because if it's not, that's going to kill this game. And then it's not going to be a 7 out of 10. It's going to really hurt the game. So you can't have replay value in a game that is too easy. So that scares me. And I'm hoping that when the game comes out, I'm pleasantly surprised that it's challenging. And, that's what's fun. So that's pretty much it. That's my prediction. What do you guys think? And feel free to give your own rating. What do you think this game's going to turn out to be? And let's try to stay positive and also try to avoid wishful thinking and thinking this thing's going to be the greatest thing. Let's just really look at it objectively. I look forward to your comments. Thanks for listening. And, you know, if they release more information, I'm going to talk about it. So this doesn't mean I'm not going to say anything till release day. But that's what it is. And I do think that's a fair rating as far as what I think it's going to be. It's just a prediction. I could be wrong. And I do hope I'm kind of wrong and that the game is even better. And the things I'm worried about, you know, it's not going to be as bad as I think. So, I'll talk to you guys when there's more stuff to talk about. Later.